Hey guys, Ryan King here, and this is just one of many Facebook live videos I'm going to be doing, and I'm a part of a bunch of different groups on Facebook, like worship leaders groups, worship musicians, keyboard players, and just a lot of groups that pertain to church music. And I've got about 15 years or so in full-time church music ministry, and during that course I've learned a lot through that time, and I see a lot of the questions and posts that you guys are posting in these groups, and it's questions and things that I asked early on in my career. And so I just wanted to maybe take some of those questions and give to you some of the things that I've learned that might help you in your church, in your situation. Maybe it'll help inspire you, maybe it'll help motivate you in helping to just move things forward where God has placed you. And so these videos are only going to be about 5 minutes long or so. I'll probably do one a day, Monday through Friday kind of thing, and just talking about various topics. And so the topic today that I wanted to talk about that I've seen quite a bit on Facebook is how to choose songs for your church. And I see a lot of guys will say, hey, there's this new song out by Bethel or Jesus Culture or Hillsong. How has it worked for you? And there's absolutely nothing wrong with asking that question, just finding out what's working at different churches. But I think the thing that we need to realize is that just because it works at one church doesn't necessarily mean that it will work at your church. And when I think about how to choose songs for your church, one of the things that I had to learn early on is that, number one, it's not about you. You're the worship leader, you're the worship pastor, whatever it might be, but it's not about you. It's about the people. It's about the congregation that God has charged you with and leading them in worship. And so when you have that kind of as your foundation, then you can begin to start to choose appropriate songs for your church. And the biggest thing is you've just got to know your church. If you're at a church that has 60 plus year olds, if it's predominantly an older generation kind of crowd, doing the latest, greatest Hillsong Young and Free is probably not going to be the smartest thing in the world. Now, that doesn't mean that that can't work. I attend a church where I see 60 plus year olds on the front row worshiping to these Young and Free tunes. And what that means is that you have to know your church. You have to know, okay, what do these people that God has here at this church, what do they need in order to engage in a meaningful way and worship the Lord? And so you have to know the people. You have to know your church. You have to know the church's culture and what do they resonate with. And throughout Scripture, there's a lot of references to shepherding. David was a shepherd. Moses was a shepherd. Jesus referred to feeding my sheep and that sort of thing. And one of the things that, as I've thought about shepherding over the years, is that one of the jobs of the shepherd is to obviously protect his flock and to help lead the sheep to green pastures. You know, whenever we look at Psalm 23, David wrote there that you cause me to lie down beside still waters, you lead me through green pastures. And so a shepherd will take the sheep to a pasture and allow them to feed, and then he'll move them on to greener pastures and to make sure that, this field doesn't get eaten all up and that sort of thing. And so what kind of the job I think for us as worship leaders, worship pastors, music directors, is we kind of have to have our thumb on the pulse of the congregation that you're leading, and knowing what resonates with them, what really connects with them. And we need to give them things that they're comfortable with, but we also need to lead them to green pastures. We need to give them things that are kind of outside of their comfort zone, kind of outside of their box. And so if you have a church that they love hymns, don't be afraid to do hymns. I know that hymns are kind of like a it feels like that's a bad word today because it's old, but there's so much truth in the hymns, and I think that that's great to incorporate. And if there's a way to do it in a style that is consistent with what you're doing at your church, then that's great. And so, again, all of it to say is that you just need to know your church, you need to know your congregation, and in order to choose the right songs for your church, it's really just experimentation. It's finding something that you think will resonate. If it resonates with you, then it will probably resonate with your team. If it resonates with your team, then it may resonate with your church. And then if you do it several times and you start to see people engaged, then you'll know that it'll start to resonate with them. I think of one song in particular that I did at a church once. It was old Hillsong tune. It's called "The Greatness of Our God." And when we first did it, it just felt dead. We loved it on stage, but the congregation just stood there and looked at us. And we did it several more times in weeks coming, and it just, the church never really grabbed hold of it. And so we kind of put it on the shelf. I'd bring it out every so often, and I started to see over time that because we took time away from it and brought it back, they started to grab hold of it, and later on it really became a strong song for our church that they really grabbed hold of. And so just because it doesn't work immediately doesn't mean that it's not going to work moving forward. And so I think it just takes experimenting, seeing what works, seeing what doesn't, and if it doesn't work, it's okay to throw it to the side, come back to it maybe later, and if it doesn't work then maybe it's time to just kind of shelve that song. But all of that to say that if you're looking to choose the right songs for your church, the first thing that you have to know is you have to know your church. You have to know your congregation. You have to know what resonates with them. And if you know that, then you can start to pick songs that you think will resonate with you, resonate with your team, and ultimately resonate with your church. And so that's kind of all for today. Again, if you want to know more about this, you can always come back and watch this after the broadcast is over. I'll be doing these probably once a day, once every other day, about at the same time, about 11 a.m., just to talk about some of these different topics. And we've got a lot of these things that you can learn outside of just some of these topics. If you're looking for training for your musicians, I work with a company called Worship Artistry. You can always go to my fan page. There's a link that'll take you straight there. You can check it out. We provide training for musicians, tutorials in today's worship songs, as well as kind of taking you from ground zero. If you don't know anything about playing an instrument, we'll teach you how to play it, how to get you prepared for playing in your church. So again, appreciate it for you guys tuning in today. Same time tomorrow, and we'll see you then.